It's all been building up to this. After amassing a sizable naval force in the South Caribbean, putting pressure on the Venezuelan government, and taking out several drug smuggling boats in the area, the US is ready to take the next big step. Deep strikes on Venezuelan soil are believed to be imminent, and the country's cartels are in the crosshairs. In the next few weeks, the world may see the first of these strikes take place, signaling the start of a much more aggressive strategy in America's war on narcotics. Here's a look back at how this point was reached, what official sources are saying, how likely these strikes are to take place, and what might happen next. In late August, US President Donald Trump ordered a large and powerful flotilla of Navy vessels to the South Caribbean Sea, not far from the coastline of Venezuela. This was the beginning of a major US push to combat drug smuggling cartels in the region. The flotilla was made up of at least 8 warships with F-35 fighter jets and 4,500 to 5,000 personnel. It was one of the biggest displays of US strength in the Caribbean in decades, and it wasn't just there for show. Days later, US forces took out the first of several vessels that were reportedly transporting narcotics across the sea, with alleged links to Venezuela's Tren de Aragua cartel. The US promised further strikes to follow, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio announcing,
"Well, this is a counter-drug operation. We're going to take on drug cartels wherever they are and wherever they're operating against the interests of the United States."
The White House also stoked tensions with the Venezuelan government, led by Nicolas Maduro, who has repeatedly claimed that America's actions are all part of a larger scheme to force him out of power and bring about a regime change. Maduro has also mobilized militia forces far and wide across his country, as well as flaunting Venezuela's military strength on several occasions, sending F-16 jets to fly by America's warships and conducting training exercises in the Caribbean. But the US has not backed down. It's gone on to target additional vessels believed to be smuggling narcotics and even conducted its own military exercises too. Now, it's ready to go to the next level. That's according to numerous anonymous but official sources who told NBC News and other media outlets that US military officials are currently in the process of drawing up options to target drug traffickers on Venezuelan soil. The sources also stated that strikes on targets within the country could be only weeks away. Carrying out deep strikes in Venezuela will certainly be an escalation of the Trump administration's campaign against cartels, but it wouldn't be a particularly surprising one. Indeed, for weeks now, many analysts have predicted that's exactly what would happen, and events so far have followed a logical path of progression. First, America sent its flotilla to the South Caribbean. Then it took out several boats allegedly operated by traffickers with narcotics on board. The US has also made clear, repeated claims that it will continue to wage war against cartels and drug smugglers and will not shy away from taking drastic measures, if necessary, to stop the flow of fentanyl and other narcotics. With Venezuela's leadership responding aggressively, the next clear step would have to be strikes on Venezuelan territory, and the US clearly has sufficient firepower to pull these kinds of attacks, given that its fearsome flotilla includes some of the world's best fighter jets, plus swarms of Reaper drones, marine amphibious-ready groups, and guided missile destroyers. According to sources who spoke with NBC News, President Trump has not yet approved or authorized any deep strikes on Venezuela, but plans are being actively discussed behind closed doors. Officials also state that the US's recent escalation in the area is a direct response to Nicolas Maduro failing to take sufficient action to stop drugs leaving his country. The exact details of any deep strike attacks are being kept under wraps for the time being, but sources have revealed that drone strikes targeting drug trafficking groups, group leaders, and drug labs would be the most likely option to begin with. As such, it's likely there won't be any large-scale missile attacks, bombing runs, or American boots on the ground in Venezuela anytime soon. But drones may be used to take out the cartel's key figures and facilities. The White House has been asked to respond to these reports, but simply referred outlets to President Trump's previous statement. We'll see what happens. Venezuela is sending us their gang members, their drug dealers, and drugs. It's not acceptable. President Trump has been weighing up the option of strikes inside Venezuela for some time now, with CNN reporting back in early September that the US president was considering a range of options to target and weaken the Latin American cartels operating in the country. And if looking back even further, there's a growing mountain of evidence to suggest that this is all part of a carefully planned long-term campaign against cartel operations. Earlier this year, for example, the Trump administration designated multiple cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, with the White House stating, "The cartels functionally control, through a campaign of assassination, terror, rape, and brute force, nearly all illegal traffic across the southern border of the United States. In certain portions of Mexico, they function as quasi-governmental entities, controlling nearly all aspects of society. The cartel's activities threaten the safety of the American people, the security of the United States, and the stability of the international order in the Western Hemisphere. Their activities, proximity to and incursions into the physical territory of the United States pose an unacceptable national security risk to the United States." Shortly after that, Trump granted permission for the US military to carry out lethal operations against the cartels the administration had officially designated as terrorist groups. In other words, the US shifted from treating drug smugglers not as mere criminals but as enemy combatants to be eliminated by any means necessary. And President Trump appears eager and determined to push on with the campaign and deal bigger blows to the cartels in the days and weeks to come, with one White House official telling reporters, "If there is an opportunity to kill terrorists, he will immediately give them the green light to do so." Another senior official stated that Trump is prepared to use every element of American power to stop drugs from flooding into our country and to bring those responsible to justice. While deep strikes seem increasingly likely, there's still a chance they might not occur. Reports also state that talks are currently taking place between the US and Venezuela, with the aid of Middle Eastern intermediaries. Maduro has allegedly spoken to these intermediaries and revealed some concessions he would be willing to make in order to remain in power. Some Trump administration officials have also expressed disappointment at how the United States military maneuvers thus far have seemingly not had any big impact in terms of weakening Maduro's grip on power. Because of that, the administration is said to be thinking very carefully about its next steps and will not make any big decisions lightly. Talks between the two nations may yet prove sufficient to scale down the conflict and prevent further actions. Maduro has openly stated that he would like to help the United States hunt down leaders of the Tren de Aragua drug cartel, which is reportedly based in Venezuela but appears in various countries across the Americas. The group has even spread all the way to Canada and is involved with extortion, prostitution, illegal mining, robbery, kidnapping, weapons trafficking, and human trafficking, on top of narcotics trafficking. The Trump administration has made Tren de Aragua one of its top targets since the president entered office, with hundreds of Venezuelans based in the US and believed to have links with the cartel arrested and deported to El Salvador prisons. According to reports, the Venezuelan president made this proposal to US envoy Rick Grenell earlier in September. Maduro also wrote a letter directly to President Trump, in which he refuted the idea that Venezuela is a major source of illegal drugs headed to the US, and also urged Trump to enter discussions in order to ease tensions between the two nations. "I respectfully invite you, President, to promote peace through constructive dialogue and mutual understanding throughout the hemisphere." At the same time, Maduro and his government have not exactly proven themselves to be trustworthy people up to this point, and relations between Venezuela and the US remain highly strained. Maduro, for example, has made numerous proclamations about what he calls the empire of the United States attempting to overthrow his regime. Meanwhile, the US has made clearly exactly what it thinks of Venezuela's leader, with White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt stating,
"The Maduro regime is not the legitimate government of Venezuela. It is a narco-terror cartel. In Maduro, it is the view of this administration, is not a legitimate president. He is a fugitive head of this cartel who has been indicted in the United States for trafficking drugs into the country."
Given the highly tense and fractured relationship between these two countries, the idea of talking out may simply not be enough to achieve any sort of outcome the US is happy with. And if talking won't get the job done, military action may be the only path of action left open. Additionally, rather than toning down its rhetoric or showing signs that it wants peace and compromise, the Venezuelan government instead continues to get ready for a direct conflict with the United States. It's carried out numerous recruitment drills in recent days and weeks, calling on as many citizens as possible to enlist, take up arms, and do their bit to defend their homeland. Thousands of militia members have joined the ranks as a result, with many older people in particular donning their combat uniforms and taking part in basic training exercises, with many learning how to handle and fire rifles for the first time in their lives. Despite their lack of training and readiness, many of these people are entirely ready to fight and die, if needed, for the sake of their country. Speaking to BBC reporters, numerous new militia members spoke of their willingness to enlist, like 69-year-old Francisco Ojeda, who said, "If I have to lay down my life in battle, I'll do it. Even the cats will come out there to shoot, to defend our fatherland." 67-year-old Gladys Rodriguez agreed, saying, "We're not going to allow any US government to come and invade." Unfortunately, many of these militia members not only lack training and readiness, but also don't seem to see how they're being exploited by their government. Benigno Alarcón, political analyst at the Andrés Bello Catholic University, is one of many experts who believes that the militia recruitment is all part of a larger plan by Maduro to build what Alarcón calls a human shield for the country's leadership. He argues that Maduro is hoping to get as many civilians enlisted in the armed forces as possible so that any US intervention in the country would likely lead to a greater loss of life, which would in turn paint the US in a negative light. In other words, Maduro wants to use his own people as cannon fodder, which is why he has no problem with senior citizens handling rifles without any prior training or experience. The Venezuelan president also continues to boast about his expanding force, recently claiming that over 8 million civilians have joined the militia. This figure is highly dubious and is likely to be an extreme exaggeration, but there's no doubt that citizens are indeed signing up in significant numbers and being dispatched to various locations around the country, ready to fight back against any sort of incursion or aggression on their territory. This is likely one of the reasons why the US doesn't currently appear to be planning any sort of boots-on-the-ground operation in Venezuela. It has thousands of Marines and sailors ready to deploy should the need arise, but sending troops into the country would be a very big, bold move that could have serious ramifications if firefights broke out between US forces and militia members. Instead, drone or missile strikes seemed the most likely and logical course of action, but could still have far-reaching consequences and lead to a major escalation of the situation. This was confirmed by Venezuelan political analyst Aníbal Sánchez Ismael, who told NBC, "An attack on Venezuelan soil would have consequences from diplomatic protests to an increase in political persecutions of those they classify as collaborators, to further uniting the population with the need to defend sovereignty reaffirmed." In other words, the situation could go one of two ways. Deep strikes on cartel targets may lead to the local population rallying against the government and even pushing Maduro out of power, or could instead have the opposite effect, unifying the people against the US. Either way, all the pieces are in place for the US to take things to the next level. All the necessary hardware and personnel are ready and waiting for their orders, and President Trump has seemingly made it one of his personal missions to combat cartels in this particular part of South America. Even dating back to Trump's first term, the Justice Department indicted Maduro on drug trafficking charges in 2020, with the administration accusing Venezuela's leader of collaborating with cartels that funnel cocaine and gang members across America's borders as part of a broader campaign of narco-terrorism. The Trump administration earlier this year also increased the reward for Maduro's arrest to a staggering $50 million, and clearly seems dead set on piling pressure on the president. The administration has also shown little interest in entering a dialogue with Maduro, with sources stating that Marco Rubio is just one of several administration officials eager to see a regime change in the country. And even when Maduro sent his letter to Trump earlier in September, the White House was quick to issue a stern yet clear response, with Caroline Leavitt saying,
Frankly, I think there were a lot of lies that were repeated by Maduro in that letter, and the administration's position on Venezuela has not changed. We view the Maduro regime as illegitimate, and the president has clearly shown that he's willing to use any and all means necessary to stop the illegal trafficking of deadly drugs from the Venezuelan regime into the United States of America.
In spite of all of this, the US is still collaborating with Venezuela in some ways. The two countries have coordinated regarding deportation flights from the US to Caracas, for example, and dozens of these flights have taken place already, removing Venezuelan citizens from America back to their country of origin. Rick Grenell, the US envoy in Venezuela, also reportedly continues to push for a diplomatic resolution to the situation, according to officials. Unfortunately, diplomacy doesn't appear to have made much impact so far, and it may be that the only language the cartels will listen to or understand is one of direct military action. The US has already proven it has the systems in place to gather the intelligence about the cartels' drug smuggling operations. It's located and tracked narcotics smugglers in their boats across the Caribbean Sea, hunting them down and taking them out with ruthless precision time after time. Following that logic, it's certainly within the military's capacities to gather intelligence about where those boats are being loaded up or where the drugs are coming from originally, identifying key targets on Venezuelan soil and carrying out more precision strikes to wipe them off the map. Indeed, it's highly likely that the military already has extensive intelligence about cartel facilities, trafficking routes, and smuggling networks far and wide across Venezuela. Priority targets have most likely been listed in preparation of upcoming strikes, and all it takes is a single order for drones or long-range missiles to be unleashed. In the blink of an eye, drug storage facilities, labs, transport vehicles, and entire smuggler groups could be taken out, dealing a huge blow to cartel operations not just in Venezuela, but across Latin America as a whole. Traffickers elsewhere may see the devastation in Venezuela and wonder if they'll be next in the firing line. And while drug trafficking will evidently never end, decisive action in the coming weeks could be enough to at least stem the flow of fentanyl and other dangerous narcotics onto American soil and into its communities. That appears to be the main aim of the Trump administration at this time, with Secretary Rubio recently stating,
Because interdiction doesn't work. You want to stop these drug cartels, you have to make clear to them they're not going to get their boats here. Interdiction, they don't care about losing a boat. They don't care about losing some drugs. They've already factored that into their business model. What will stop them completely is if they know if they go out there, they're not going to make the journey. Look, this is an imminent, immediate threat to the United States. If you tell me there's a boat full of drugs headed towards the United States, to drop off drugs here and poison our people, that's as big a threat as if some, country was coming in to attack an American city. It needs to be stopped. The way it's been handled in the past hasn't worked. And boy, let me tell you something. You're not seeing nearly as many boats right now as you were a couple weeks ago. So it has worked and it will continue to work. And the president's very simple. He's not going to continue to allow these drug cartels to flood America with poisonous drugs that are killing our people indefinitely.
The message from the US is clear and consistent. Drugs have to be stopped. And if that means drone or missile attacks or even more drastic military actions in South America, then so be it. Whatever actions the US takes next will also inevitably have knock-on effects for the Maduro regime. Maduro and various members of his government are reported to have close links with the cartels. And if those same cartels start coming under fire from the US military, they may decide that the current leadership is no longer fit for purpose. This could eventually lead to a coup, a rebellion, or some other complete shift of power, with Maduro ultimately deposed and someone else, ideally someone who's much more willing to work with the US and crack down on cartels, taking his place. Either way, the coming weeks are set to be explosive in more ways than one for Venezuela's cartels and those that support them. The only question left is, when and where will America strike first? Now, learn more about how we reached this point in our recent videos, looking at how Venezuela tried to provoke the US Navy flotilla with its F-16 jets, and how Maduro has slowly but surely prepared his people for all-out war with America. And finally, make sure to subscribe to our channel too, so you can be among the first to find out about what happens next.